Good morning, everyone. We are continuing with our discussion of the Festival of Light. We're getting close to the last few words. Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, Friend, Beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, Beloved Master Paramhansa Yogananda, Saints of all religions, dear friend and guide Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to you all. We are deeply grateful for the opportunity to study your teachings, to learn the secrets of happiness, to apply ourselves with devotion and courage to living according to thy divine law. We are your children. Guide us and bless us. Om. Peace. Amen. So, we are really at the very end of the festival. We've done the arati. We've gone through the whole drama of the soul's long journey. And so now the Festival of Light turns into the point where the individuals who are participating come to the altar to be blessed by the light bearer as the instrument of the masters. So Swamiji, in keeping with the principles of self-realization, where everything must be personally chosen, it's not imposed upon the devotee, the light bearer takes the candle that he or she has just used and offered at the altar. The idea being that this is we have lit this candle from the noble taper of intercommunion. Then we have offered it through the arati, sanctified it by offering it at the altar, then holding that light in the light bearer holding it in their hand, says, we invite those who feel so inclined. We invite those who feel so inclined, which is, even after all of this, it's up to the individual to make the decision as to whether they're going to receive this light, to all those who received it. So right to the very last, we invite those who feel so inclined to come up to the altar now, and what Swami calls it is the touch of light from the masters. So the touch of light has become sort of a phrase that we who are participating in this ritual, this is the time for the touch of light. And so it is the light bearer who's actually using the fingers of their hand to magnetize the spiritual eye of the devotee. But the idea is that the light is coming from the masters and coming like this. You know, the development of many aspects of Ananda that now look like they have always been there has all happened within my living memory, because as I talked about at different phases of this, the Festival of Light coincided with Swami's decision that we would present ourselves more in the light of a personal church for people. I do another class series on the book I wrote about Swami, which is also called Light Bearer as It Happens. And 1986 is the class that I'm at right now, April 5th, tomorrow, 2022. And let me just find the thought here. Give me just a moment. Where was I with this? Just a second, I lost my thought, but I will find it. Oh, yes. In the context of when 1994, when here in Ananda Palo Alto we were able to buy this beautiful building, this beautiful Catholic church it had been and converted into a church of self-realization, we had to create the altar because it had been a Catholic church, so they'd never had an altar. And in those early years, less so now because people are more sophisticated, but in the early years, there was a lot of question is why do we have these pictures of these people on the altar? And it was always, we were always trying to have to explain it. And the idea was there, and this actually, I believe, may have started in Assisi before it came here, that the real source of the light that comes from the masters is the light of the spiritual eye, which is when one is meditating deeply and concentration is still, you see this pattern of light in front of your closed eyes just above the horizon line. And it is the reflection in light form of the energy in the spine and the astral and causal worlds where we are heading. A golden ring, a deep blue field, and a white star, a white five-pointed star in the middle of that. People who have nothing to do with the yogic path will still see this. I was remembering in Assisi when they were building their temple there, and they were having they wanted to have a glass rendition of the spiritual eye created, and Arjuna, who was leading the project, who works with a lot of intuition, I believe he was in Rome, and he was looking for a glass blower who could create this, and he was led to this particular shop, and he was talking to the owner, and he starts describing what he wants and why he wants it. And the shop owner was astonished. Really, he says, that's something I've been seeing all my life, and no one has ever been able to tell me what it is. He had no association with yoga or with our path or anything like that, but because of his own karma, he just was able to move himself somewhat effortlessly into a higher dimension and see that particular pattern of light. Well, when we were putting up our church here, I had the thought that the largest element on the altar ought to be the spiritual eye because it is the origin point of everything that we're doing. So, and also the scale of our particular altar is very large because we have a lot of vertical height. We have horizontal spaciousness too, but we especially have vertical height. So we have a very large vertical altar. So we made the spiritual eye. First we had a painted glass one. Now we have one that was made by Shantidev in Assisi with the particular unique yantras and art form that he uses. And we made it as large as we could make it, given the architecture of the building, basically, which was about 4 yards across. 4 feet in diameter is what it is. 4 yards would have been great, but it was 4 feet. And I used to have to try to explain to people sort of what the masters were, but once we put that picture, the spiritual eye up there, it became so easy that the spiritual eye is the origin point, representing the infinite consciousness. The masters are a manifestation of that. And I'm saying this because then through the masters, we offer the light. The light is, the candle light is energized and inhabited in a real sense by the vibration of the masters. We then turn around and offer that touch of light from the masters to all those devotees who feel so inclined to accept that light of the masters. This is also, feel so inclined, means that it's not automatic. Merely to touch someone, yes, maybe some little transmission will take place if the one offering the touch has any magnetism at all, and the master will come through somewhat. But it won't go anywhere, it won't go in, it won't transform unless we accept the invitation and feel so inclined. And that word, we invite, it's just such a nice word. And it also, it's like it's a standing invitation from the masters. I've talked about this a great deal in many contexts because, to my mind, it's such an important aspect of the spiritual path that the master's unconditional love is constantly being showered upon us. It's a standing invitation to come into that light. That meaning that from their side we are always welcome. But for us, it's if we feel so inclined. And I was speaking about the spiritual eye and the masters and all of that because, of course, whenever it is my privilege to be able to carry forth this ritual or stand in the position of transmitting that light, I do my best to be conscious of what the experience is. And standing there with my back to the altar, having just done the arati where my face was to the altar, I'm very aware of the power of the spiritual eye coming through the masters and being a living force. I'm not much inclined to paranormal experiences. I have intuition and I have feelings, but I don't see things. But I almost see things. It's the only way I can put it, because the intuitive awareness of them sometimes is very intense, and therefore I almost see it. And what I almost see is this divine light just literally coming right through all those people, coming in through my medulla, through my spine in the back, and then coming out through my hand, which makes it have nothing to do with me. It's just this force that moves through us. I just want to just tell you an anecdote, unrelated to the festival, but related to the altar. When we first acquired the church, the temple that we have now, and we were not ready yet to commit ourselves to remodeling and redesigning in any way, but we wanted to put a usable altar up immediately that we would eventually replace when we had time to think it through more carefully. So over this blank pillar that was, I believe, painted rather a dark color, we hung this huge, huge velvet curtain that we created by sewing many lengths of fabric together. This huge velvet curtain, and then we drilled some holes in it through that and put hooks on the pillar, and then hung pictures of the master. So it actually looked quite nice, but it was very simple and it was easy to assemble, relatively speaking, and easy to remove. Easy, I say relatively speaking, because we had to rent a scaffolding and climb up on the scaffolding. Another woman and myself, there was one man and two women, and we were working on it late into the night, I believe on a Saturday night, to have it ready for the next Sunday morning. When my woman friend and I, Allie McKeon it was, climbed up on that scaffolding, was the first time we confessed to each other that we both had a terrible fear of heights. So even though it was a perfectly solid scaffolding, it was a bit of a hairy experience for the both of us working on it. But we managed to get the whole thing set up. We managed to move the scaffolding, just to push the scaffolding aside. And I sort of didn't, I stood at the foot of it and looked up, and it's, 20 feet or something like that. It's very big. And then I turned my back, and I walked down to the entryway to the temple, because I really wanted, when the people came in the next day, I wanted to see what they were going to see. And I walked back deliberately without looking at it. Then I turned to face the altar. It's in the middle of the night. There's 3 of us in this huge chapel. I'm as far away from the altar as a person can be and still be in the same room. And I felt what I could only call an astral wind. That's a phrase that I got from Swami Kriyananda writing in The Path about Master getting the impulse to call a certain person to donate money to pay the final debt on Mount Washington so they could buy the property. It was a big dramatic event. And Master referred in that context to an astral wind. Just this force of energy that feels like wind, but it's not physical wind. Well, I knew that phrase, and I stood there looking at those pictures, and I felt an astral wind. This tremendous force of energy came off that altar and just blew over my head and blew out the door. And I felt, whether it was true or not, but this is what I felt the masters had come rushing down the aisle and rushed out into the peninsula, the Bay Area where I live, And it was like, now we can get to work. It was just exactly, they were so delighted that now we had this place and we could really begin to do it. So every time, I would say virtually every time, almost every time, because I can't say for certain that it's every time, that I stand in the altar and hold that candle out to the congregation, we invite those of you who feel so inclined to come to the altar now and receive the touch of light from the Masters. A little breeze, if not the full astral wind, but a little bit of that astral breeze just comes from the spiritual eye through those Masters and goes through me as I'm holding this forward. I become a permeable screen through which that can flow out into the congregation to invite, because I want to make that invitation magnetic. Yeah, it's not like, oh, come if you want. No, we invite you to come and receive this touch of light from the Masters, and also having the wish to awaken in them, at that moment, the same sense of reverence that I feel, and the same realization of what a privilege this is. How many incarnations did we have to live through? How much good karma did we have to acquire before we have the opportunity to receive this touch of light from the Masters? I mean, we can see all around us that even though this is so magnetic to those of us who are involved, many people, it just goes right past them. They just don't see it at all. I don't know how else to say it. Just a moment, there's another thought hovering there. No, it's gone away. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Whenever someone comes to our temple for the first time, and because many, many people have been coming to our temple for years and years and years, we are a spiritual family. When someone isn't there for the first time, it's usually obvious because we've never seen their face before, or they're newish. So I'll often introduce myself, and I'm so glad you're here. And if they express any enthusiasm for what they experienced, I don't say this to everyone, but if they express enthusiasm and how much they like it, I'll often say, for many of us, this spiritual path, this family, this teaching has been, the defining blessing of our lives. And I say for those of us for whom it works, it really does work. And I just pray that you find here what many of us have found, and that it can become that spiritual lifeline for you. Because I never cease to appreciate how extraordinary it is. Sometimes they say, there's an actual saying which is really terrible, which is, no man is great to his own valet, or familiarity breeds contempt. It's this thought that when you get close with it, something may seem impressive, but when you get close to it, its flaws will be revealed. And it's a very cynical statement, but alas, sometimes it's true. But the fact of the matter is, Swami spoke about his experience of Master, that in contrast to that, the more he knew him, the greater he knew him to be. And that's how I certainly felt about Swami. Swami's what I might have perceived to be as his shortcomings, which I never really did, but what I perceived to be as things I didn't understand, over the years, everything resolved. And it was always because there was a more subtle and interesting explanation than the one I knew. So it got to the point where I inquired rather than accused. Why did you handle it this way? What were you thinking? What did you mean by this? Rather than, what did you mean by that? You see, you can see exactly the same thing, and depending on your inner attitude, you have it's a completely different experience, what you're asking. So, despite 50 years on this path, and daily, deep participation in it all that time, my awe and appreciation magnifies rather than diminishes. So as many times as I've said, we invite all of you who feel so inclined. I still know every time I do it, what a tremendous potential it is if we feel so inclined. So, again, I find myself through this series, every time I come to even the smallest phrase, I realize within myself how much Swami has planted in this. And this is what he told us a number of decades ago when he first presented this to us, that ritual has the potential, if we participate in it with conscious awareness, to really transform our consciousness. Otherwise, it's just words. So, again, if we feel so inclined, this is what happens. So then Swamiji guides us a little bit more as you approach the altar. Now again, as you're walking to the light bearer, literally, but you're approaching the altar, and I love it because everyone else is facing the altar except the few of us who are offering the touch of light. But you can see on people's faces what they're concentrating on, and most of the time they're not looking at us, they're looking past us at this beautiful array of the masters with the spiritual eye above it, which is what they should be looking at. It's very gratifying to me not to be noticed in this process, but to be understood as merely a sieve through which the energy is going to pass, and a physical connecting point, because we live in physical bodies and we need physical connecting points, but it's a connecting point to something else. It's not the origin of what's happening. So he says, as you approach the altar, and as you approach to receive this touch of light, he says, offer a prayer of gratitude. So here he's trying to give us what is the right attitude as I walk forward. Offer a prayer of gratitude to the infinite Christ, he says there. Because even though Jesus is on the altar, in the center of the altar, Jesus appeared to the great Master Babaji, that the entire line was offered here in response to the need that Jesus perceived for his disciples to have a deeper understanding. Even though all of that is true, what we're really offering our gratitude is not to Jesus not to Jesus as defined by the fact that he held a physical body and lived as an individual, but to the infinite Christ consciousness that gave him his power. He was Jesus the Christ, which means Jesus the Anointed One. And it's the same word as Krishna. Krishna is the same origin point as Christ, and because they are both anointed of God. So when we're offering our gratitude to the infinite Christ, we are offering our gratitude to that infinite Christ as it expressed through this line of masters, through these individual jivas who in their compassion, in the fourth stage of the soul's long journey, gave up their freedom in God in order to show us how to become free as they are free. But it was not their physical incarnation per se that gave it the power. It was the fact that their consciousness was one with the infinite Christ. So as we approach, offer a prayer of gratitude, which is an inward acknowledgement to that divine infinite everywhere, in whose love our line of masters have descended. So we're walking up to the altar to receive the touch of light from these masters. We are celebrating the descent of grace, and they have come to us with the love of the infinite, and that's the ever-present, omnipresent, open invitation of unconditional acceptance and love, in whose love our line of masters have descended, that we might all come to God. That's a very big promise, isn't it? That we might all come to God. That's why we're receiving the touch of light from the masters, is so that we might all come to God. And the masters themselves do not rest content as long as one stray brother is left behind. Master wrote that magnificent poem, I will return again and again, 1,000,000,000 times if necessary, as long as one stray brother is left behind. Many times in the commentary that I've been giving on the Festival of Light, I've emphasized how personal and individual the masters are to us. We have the word impersonal in our spiritual lexicon, but impersonal is how I regard myself, but not how the master regards me. Impersonal love is not that you don't respond to the individual needs of the person that you are called to serve, but we're impersonal about ourselves. We see the personal needs of the people next to us, but we're impersonal about ourselves. So when our line of masters have descended, that we might all come to God. They're very individually concerned, and their mission is measured heart by heart, and society is transformed. Dwapara Yuga is brought into the world heart by heart, one by one by one. Right now we are living in very tumultuous times, April 2022, which we don't know how widespread that tumult will become. And that tumult is being perpetrated by individual hearts, by individual jivas, individuals in positions of control of tremendous resources, position in command of armies and other people's lives, in command of weapons, of decision, of propaganda, of all sorts of things, one by one. If those hearts could be transformed to divine love, then the tumult would cease. This is just simply what it is. That's why in Autobiography of a Yogi, Master says, Jesus and Babaji have planned the spiritual salvation of this age through the process of self-realization, heart by heart by heart. So here we are. We invite you, if you're so inclined, as you approach, as you come close to the altar, offer a prayer of gratitude, because you see, gratitude is extremely magnetic. And what we are trying to develop is the magnetism to draw the power of God to us. I told that story recently of Jesus walking through the crowd and suddenly feeling that someone had touched him, because a woman who had the magnetism to receive touched the hem of his garment, and automatically the power of the infinite flowed through Jesus, and he could feel it flowing through. It was not a conscious decision on his part. He is a perfect expression of the infinite love, of the divine. It flows through him constantly, but it can only flow where there is an outlet for it to go. So when this woman had the magnetism to open the door, he felt the energy flooding through him. Her heart, and this had happened also, her body was healed in that moment, and her heart was transformed. And so the masters are here for one reason, so that each one of us, so that we might all come to God. When I'm in the congregation and looking at this group of people, and I hear that, that we might all come to God. And the gratitude, you see, if you give something to someone and they respond with gratitude, one has the inclination to give more, because one sees that the heart is receptive. One knows that one can give more. If you give someone a present and they say, why did you buy me that? That's not what I really wanted. I specifically asked you for something else. It's like, next time I think I'll just give you nothing, because there's no magnetism. But if even in something so small, as relatively small, as receiving the touch of light from the masters, it's not saving our lives from terrible death or sparing the lives of our loved ones. It's the touch of light. There's nothing dramatic in the moment about it. But we offer a prayer of gratitude to the infinite Christ for making it possible for me to know these teachings and to live in your light. God bless you, my friend.